First of all, good morning and welcome to Birdsong Studio, at least what you can see of it. My wife and I are very blessed to have a beautiful property in downtown Okotoks on historic Elma Street. We have been here, gosh, almost 2 years now. It'll be 2 years, I think, at the end of June. I was rather late to painting. I started at the age of 47. After I was just telling this story to a former CFL offensive lineman who was staying with us at our Airbnb, Patrick. I lost an election and my professional life was kind of in limbo. And I started working with the United Way in Fort McMurray, and I started painting days later. And it has turned into this. I now paint every day and have very generous clients from coast to coast that purchase the things that I paint, and super grateful to be here in Okotoks. I'm sorry, I can't figure out where to look. So that's a little bit about me. Our studio is a wonderful place. If you're in the area and you ever want to come and paint with us, we certainly encourage you to do that. So this workshop is absolutely not about painting rocks and making them look like rocks. Well, maybe a little bit, but really it's not about that. It's about something a little bit deeper than that. And it was about a year ago at the beginning of the pandemic, I was really having a stressful day, and I decided to go for a walk. A couple of blocks from our house is a dry riverbed, very close to the Sheep River, and there's amazing rocks for building Inukshuks there. And so I took Coco for a walk and built an Inukshuk, and it was very calming at a time when I need a little bit of calm. And then I took a photo of the rock pile or the Inukshuk that I had made, and then I came back to the studio and I painted it, just to give you a sense of the journey that we're going to go on. So this is called Tranquility Rocks, and it really is not a difficult process, and it was super relaxing. And so it got me to think, well, how can I put this into a workshop that is useful for people, that's relaxing and reflective? And so I did that. And I was reminded why in my sleep the other night. I had a very vivid dream of a former boss of mine from up in Fort McMurray who is no longer with us. And in the dream, he was passing along a lesson of some kind. I don't remember the specific lesson, but I remember distinctly that it was a lesson. And he passed along many of those when I worked for him in the 1990s. And I want to encourage you right now just to take a moment to think about the people in your life that have maybe inspired you or taught you or passed along wisdom. Because I bet you there's a lot of them. And that's how it links back to the name of the workshop, which is A River Runs Through It. One of my favorite films, there is a scene at the end of the film where the gentleman who the story is about and was written by says something like this: eventually all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. The river was cut by the world's great flood, runs over rocks from the basement of time. On some of the rocks are timeless raindrops, and under the rocks are the words, and some of the words are theirs. It's a powerful piece of poetry that really is about we are really influenced by the generations that have come before. The lessons they have passed along, the way that they lived. We are a combination of many, many people that have been a part of our lives. And so to start, I don't think I had it on the list, but if you have a pencil, and if you don't, just go grab a pencil. And before we even begin painting, I want to encourage you to write on your canvas anything that comes to mind about the lessons and the people that have influenced your journey to date. And it could be a quick thank you letter, it could be words, it could be phrases. I just want you to write on the canvas, knowing that at the end of the day, nobody's going to see what you write because we're going to cover it up with paint. It's more symbolic and to get us into the right headspace. So on your canvas, I'm going to try to do this without choking myself. You're just going to write down words. Don't think too much about it. Just whatever words, sentences, if it's a letter, whatever pops into your mind about the people that have helped shape the human being that you are today. So I've written what I need to write. I'm going to give you one more minute to write in pencil whatever pops to your mind on the canvas. Again, it will be covered by paint, but you'll know it's there and you'll know the message that it contains. It will add meaning to the work that you're going to do. Awesome. So just wrap that up. Thinking about whatever popped into your mind. This is the part where we're not going to be thinking literally about what we're about to paint. We're going to try to go a little bit deeper, which is why, if you notice to the right of my canvas is a picture that I took of some rocks. They're in black and white very specifically because this exercise cannot be about painting a bunch of rocks and trying to make them look like they are in the environment. That's not what this is about. So these rocks were piled up along the shore of Waterton Lake when we were there a few days ago, and I took a picture of it. So somebody had specifically gone, taken some time to reflect and build this pile of rocks. So for me, that was interesting, and that's what I've chosen to do. So hopefully you have a source image in front of you. And if you don't panic, it's okay. We'll make it work. But thinking about the person or the people that have influenced your journey, that have provided wisdom and guidance and support and love and encouragement, all those things, I want you to see a color. Don't even think about what first color pops into your mind. And I would like to encourage you now to use that color or variations of that color, or just use that color as your starting point to cover your entire canvas. Now, this is just a technical thing for me. I'm going to choose to take a water sprayer. So I kind of have an idea of, I want it to be, I'm just going to cover it up with quite a bit of paint. And I'm going to use a wider brush. So if you don't have a super wide brush, that's fine. Whatever you have and whatever kind of canvas size that you have, you can just go with the color that popped into your mind and your heart and use that as your starting point, okay? This will be interesting because I normally do this flat. So I'm going to try to do this not flat today. And by the way, if you have any questions, just put it in the chat box there. I will try to see it as best I can. I'm not going to think too much about this, what colors I put. So I have all my paints just to my left. You may not have a lot of paint around you, and that's fine. This is not going to require a massive amount of colors, really, unless you choose to put a lot on there. All right. So again, you're not going to be futzing too much about it. You're just going to, I'm choosing to kind of do an arc shape or an arc pattern. Paint. And of course, the color I really want is not here. So that's why it's good for me to have all of my colors fairly close by. And if you have a water sprayer, it's amazing. It depends on your environment, of course, how quickly everything dries up. It doesn't take a long time. Wow, I'm just shocked how quickly it dries. The key is to get all of the canvas covered, one way or the other. And I am assuming that you're using acrylic paint. This is not an exercise that would work with oil, I don't believe, because it has to dry fairly fast. Or we want it to dry very fast anyway. And I'll say it a couple of times. If this is, if you find this is a useful process, and you can see if you're an educator or if you're a team leader and you'd like to do this similar kind of workshop with a team or with a special event or a birthday party, steal away. This is just an idea that I developed at the beginning of the pandemic and then executed it during a virtual session that happened with colleagues from around the world back in, I think it was January. I like putting movement in my strokes as opposed to it just being one solid color. It just creates some visual interest. I'm not sure why I wanted blue, to be honest. Maybe I saw water. That was the first color that popped in my mind. I'm using a fairly large canvas today. 24 by 24, just so you can see it well. But really, canvas size with this particular workshop, it really doesn't matter. You could be working on something as small as 12 by 12, it's still going to work fine. So that if you're ever doing this with a team, you don't have to have huge expenses. Just need 2 basic colors, 2 brushes, and you are golden. Again, I normally do this part on a flat table, but it doesn't quite work with the workshop, so I'm attempting it this way for squeaks and giggles. All right, a little bit of hair that is showing up on my canvas, and it's not going off, so maybe I'm just gonna let it live there. It'll add texture. All right. All right, good enough for me. Are you done your background? Just send me a chat message to say I'm done or I'm not done. So many people are on, well, there's 5 people. Do you need more time? Just let me know. Wash that brush out really well. Done-ish, good, Rhonda, good. Which is kind of good because right now we want to mostly let it dry just so that it's mostly set. Well, since I have time, I'm going to try to get rid of this little hair that's causing trouble here. Oh, okay, that's gone now. Okay. Okay. So now that the background is done, it doesn't need to be perfect. We can always go back and do some touching up later. It's time to look at the rock picture that you have, or the pile of rocks, or the Inukshuks picture that you have. And what we're going to do is, in a minute or two, we're going to paint the shapes using whatever you have for black. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly black. It could be Payne's gray. It could be dark purple, anything that's dark, but preferably if you have black, black is the best thing to do. And this is where no perfection is necessary at all. It really is not. You're going to have a picture of the rocks. You can use the picture that is next to mine. If you don't have one and you want to use one, that's perfectly fine with me. And what we're going to do is we're going to, without being overly precise about it, we're going to begin to color the individual rocks totally black. So all you're trying to do is get the shape of the rock. That's it. You're not trying to get any of the detail. Just what is the first rock on the top pile of the pile? Again, there is no perfection in this, and there are no mistakes. I used to say to the kids when I used to do a lot of workshops in schools, there are no mistakes in painting. There really aren't. So we're just going to do that. So that's my first rock. Second rock is going to be something like this. Very loose. Third rock. That. And you're going to find the paint underneath might still be wet, and that's fine. We're going over with a black. We're just covering everything up to create the shapes of the rocks. Last time I did this exercise, I actually used a pile of rocks that we saw in the Sheep River. My son and I went for a float down the river just at the end of the season. And it was really fun, relaxing. Again, super loose, you're just painting black on the shapes of the rocks. And you're not looking to be precise, you're just using whatever image you have as a guide. Really, the only visual thing you're trying to communicate is that these rocks, in whatever pile you have in front of you, the way that you're painting it makes it look plausible that they're actually going to be standing. Does that make sense? In other words, just make sure that there is some sort of centrality to it, that the rocks conceivably would balance on each other, and that's really the only thing you have to be concerned with. And the great thing about this exercise is you don't want there to be any uniformity to it. So you don't want the rocks to look perfect or perfectly balanced. You want some imbalance in a way, create visual interest. Yeah, and then when you're done, just take a step back and see, okay, do you need to extend anything? Do you want to put something a little bit different? So I'm choosing to just make mine a little bit wider there. And this is a good time to use the squint test. I just sort of half close my eyes and look at it, see how does it look like when I'm doing what I call the squint test, and does it work? I'm just going to do a couple other things here for a second. I'm going to have some supporting rocks. Something like that, just to give the indication that this is a pile of rocks that kind of spreads out a little bit here. Right. So you should have your background painted. You should have beginnings of your rock pile ready to go. And just going to check who's on with us here this morning. Let me see. We've got Kelly and Carrie and Rhonda. I know Carrie's in Ontario. Rhonda's probably in Fort McMurray. I'm not sure. Kelly might be Okotoks. So I'm glad you're all with us today. And let me know if you need a bit more time, or if we can carry on. The next decision that you're going to make, and this is the real basic decision, and I would encourage you to make the decision not based on what you're seeing in front of you in terms of your rock pile, but just where your heart leads. So the question is, the decision you need to make is, where is the light coming from? So if you take a step back and you just do the squint test, in your mind, where is the light coming from in your piece? So the light could be coming from the left, the bottom left, center left, upper left. It could be coming straight down. It could be coming from the right. It could be coming from behind. The decision that you make about where the light is coming from is super cool. Thank you, Kelly. So ask yourself where you want your light coming from. And where the light comes from will determine how we paint the rocks. And again, I want you to not be concerned about, well, what color is a rock? I want you to get out of that space entirely and really focus on allowing yourself to play with color and to play with light. And I'm going to start painting to give you a sense of that. I have to make some decisions myself right now. And I find that I probably make the similar decision. So I'm trying to go against what I normally do. Is it ever hard though? Because I sense I want to have the light coming from this side. I think I got to. I think that's where my heart is. So I'm going to have my light coming from the right, my right. I'm not sure if that's your right or your left. So where is your light coming from? And I'm just going to start adding some color, thinking about where the light is coming from. And you know what? For this, it doesn't particularly matter if your black is completely dry or not. It actually is fun what happens when paint goes on top of paint. And I think the most important thing right now is that this is just the opening salvo of your colors. You're putting paint down, you're trying to establish where's the light coming from. And if it doesn't feel right as we go along, you can always make adjustments because everything's going to change as that black sets. And you're probably going to want to go over top of it again. just guessing. Everybody's going to be slightly different. So when you're thinking about where your light is coming from, ask yourself if it's coming from a particular direction, how is it going to land on the rock? So where's the brightest part of that rock going to be? And on the shadow side, it will not be bright at all. It'll be the opposite. And so you get to make some choices. Well, what color do you want on your shadow side? Do you want your rocks to be smooth? Do you want them to be rough, full of specks? Those are all choices you get to make. Again, you could use the image that you have as inspiration, but you certainly don't need to stay true to whatever the image is that you have in front of you. Because now that you have your rocks painted, it's your journey to go on. So I've done this workshop with creativity people from around the world. I've done a version of this workshop with a women's basketball team from Medicine Hat College. And they did a beautiful job. You don't have to have a lot of painting experience to do this particular workshop. And that's fun. So that's why I think it is good for a team building exercise. If you're a leader of teams, or if you want to do a fun, creative birthday party when we're allowed to, because gosh knows we can't right now. I'm just using, by the way, you can see that I use an angle brush a lot. I know a lot of artists don't, but I became addicted to angle brushes early on. So that's what I use. And while you're painting, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much, I feel like I have to fill the space with some sound, but think about the people and the lessons that you've learned that brought you to where you are today in your life, and certainly express some gratitude in your heart for those people that have helped you, refine you, to nurture you. It's good to reflect on that as we go through. So you can begin to see that where the light is coming from. This method of painting, whatever the shape is, black, I use it in a number of the things that I do. When I'm doing animals on black, I will often have the animal painted black and I'll go over top of it. It just seems to be a good way to cover the canvas really quickly and give a good base. Other artists do use other undercolors. That's the thing about it. You just sort of go on your journey and you develop your own style as you go along. So I tend to mix a lot of colors, and I'm mixing on a meat tray is sort of what I use typically for my palette. There's always a lot of them around, and I like to recycle them because they're not very recyclable. Again, if you have any specific questions as you're going along, don't hesitate. I'm looking back and forth at the chat box just in case there are questions. It's funny that the former boss that I dreamt about the other night, he passed away way too young from a very uncommon heart condition. But I think about the amount of lessons that he passed along to me, and there's just so many. And so much of what I am today is because of people like him. Old drum skins. That's cool. That's Carrie out in Ontario today. Dear friend of ours. And so sort of what happens as you work from light to dark is that you begin to just feel out the shape of the rock. And for me, I'm kind of looking back and forth. I ended up picking the direction of the light that is sort of shown in the photograph, though it's not necessary that I did that, but I just sort of, that's where my brain went. Which is one of the reasons that I use a black and white reference photo, generally speaking, is because as much as I try not to, what you're seeing, you tend to want to replicate it. And so the interesting color choices that I make are largely due to the fact that I'm looking at a black and white image and I have to figure out the color on my own. I don't think that would happen as effectively if I was looking at a color image. I really look forward to the day when I could do this workshop in person and that we could all take a field trip together down to the river to build our own Inukshuk and then come back and paint it. That certainly got disrupted by the pandemic. Of course, I'm working from light to dark. You don't have to. You can go dark to light. Really, whatever is calling you to do. I find to keep doing the squint test to look at how it's coming together. I think what's interesting to note is that I didn't pre-plan my painting at all. And so for me, there's an element of, well, this is a live painting situation because I used to do a lot of that in normal life before the pandemic came along. And there was always an element of not risk, but yeah, you have to trust that it's going to work out, right? And so this is not planned, the color choices, it's all very organic. The process I've done many times, but the choices I'm making are choices that are being made right on the spot. I'm just seeing where they take me. When I did this workshop with the college basketball team, the works they did were gorgeous. They really were. And these were young ladies that had never painted before. And they just went with it. And at the end of the day, all of our paintings were different. And they were all really great. So always keep asking yourself, am I expressing where the light is coming from? Is it coming through in the painting? I'm doing it myself as I go along, kind of going back and touching up my whites, seeing if I can change the shapes of the rocks a little bit to make that expression of light more definitive. The great thing is there is absolutely no right or wrong in whatever you're doing, because this is completely yours. It's not like you're trying to do a portrait where you're trying to make something look like something specific. You just want to create the sense that there's an Inuksuk here. One of the things that choosing direction for the light does is it puts you in the frame of mind to make a choice that creates contrast. And contrast is really what makes a painting interesting. Is is your eye drawn to a particular point, and then does it then go to the dark side to see, oh, what's happening over there? And this just allows that to happen. Quite lovely. And I like working wet like this, where paints are unexpectedly mixing because the previous layer is not quite dry yet. And I'm okay with that. Bob Ross is right with this happy little accidents comment. Because some of the most magical ideas happen by accident. How are you doing? Hope you're starting to see come together. I'm using a variety of different techniques, brush techniques, just playing with different ideas, knowing that each rock is very different. They're not the same style of rock, so I'm having some variety, visual variety in what I'm doing for paint strokes. And truly just feeling it out, seeing where it wants to take me. There's absolutely no rush because we've got lots of time. Lots and lots of time. I'm going to show a fun rock technique here in a little bit. Just got to put a bit more paint down to get to that point. We're getting close. So with my color choices, I often have magentas and purples on one side and turquoise and this sort of sea green on the other side. It's just something I've done and developed over the last number of years. You can do anything you want. For your shadow side, you could go in the blue realm. It really is completely and utterly up to you, of course. There's no right or wrong. Yeah, so Carrie's asking about the story of the Inukshuks. My understanding is that the Inukshuks were ways of communicating and sharing wisdom. So they would be built to share that there was good fishing grounds or hunting grounds. They were used to help with directions way in the far north. I did one, and someone suggested calling it "We Are Here." And that was an interesting comment because an Inukshuk says that people were there in this space, in this time. And that's pretty awesomely cool. But I think that's the reason it was in the North, so few people. So how do you pass down wisdom and share information about hunting grounds or hazards? I believe that was the how and why they were used. But you see them all over, like when people are hiking and they run into some interesting rock piles, they, they feel compelled to make them. And I think they're fun because they show up in unexpected places. They keep looking back and forth to see if the light's making sense. And I do the squint test to give me a sense of, all right, when you look at this at an instant, can you see what it is? Is it working in terms of the light? I don't spend a lot of time thinking when I'm painting. Not about the act of painting. I really don't. For me, it's an instinctual exercise, trying to stay out of my head more than anything else. And if I have a feeling about something, I go with the feeling. Now, sometimes, you know what, it doesn't work and I got to go back and fix it. But it's in going with the feelings that real interesting things happen. So I said I was going to show you a little bit of a rock technique. Let's see if I can get this close to the screen. This is one of those things you have in your kitchen. What's like like a scrubbing pad with a little sponge on the scrubber on the one side, the sponge on the other. And I cut off a little piece. It's not very big. It's like that. And I take the, gosh, I might need a new one. Well, we'll try this one. And I dip it in some colors. I want to put some texture in here. And again, this is very random because you can't control it very much. You're going to have some very random patterns that get added. So if you have access to your kitchen, you just grab a little piece, cut it off with a knife or something, and then you get to add some very interesting random rock texture that you won't be able to see from the screen because it's too far away, but in person, it really does make it makes it way more interesting to look at for sure. And because you can't control it, you again have happy little accidents. And if you do it fast enough, you actually pick up some paint that is still wet on the canvas, and so all of a sudden you get some other happy little accidents. At the end of the day, when someone looks at your painting up close, they'll say, "How did you do that texture thing? It's so cool." And then you can proceed to tell them it's not that hard. And when you're using the sponge, on the one side where the light's coming from, you're going to use more white, for sure, because again, you want to express the way the light's hitting the rocks. And then as you go towards the shadow side, you're going to begin to pick up other darker colors. Yeah, it's funny how little tools like this, just stuff you have around the house, can be really great for just having fun and adding some super visual interest to the piece. Also makes an interesting noise, doesn't it? Yes, it does. All right. You know, the thing for me as I look at my painting is I can't decide yet. I haven't decided whether, where is this thing? Is it sky in the background? Is it set up against water? And I don't know yet. Something tells me at the very end I might just do a whole bunch of water splashes. That's the fun thing about it. Don't need to make those decisions quite yet. So I know, Jamie, you're on the call. Is there a way for people to share their progress, or is that just something they send afterwards? If you could answer that question for me, if you're listening, I'd love to see how other people are doing. And if not, that's fine. We can always have them email it after, but I wasn't sure about that part. This is my first webinar using Zoom. We've all used Zoom in various ways over the last number of months, but this is the first time I'm in webinar mode. So I'm still learning. The other thing I do, okay, that's great, Jamie, thank you. So perhaps when you're done, if you can tag the Town of Okotoks Culture and Heritage Department in your picture of your final work, that'd be awesome. So I'm using a combination of a couple of different types of paints. I should just share that. So I use liquid paints, a mix of, I have some golden brand. The other brand that I use is called Opus. I've got a really big selection of liquid paints. The other thing I use are these Liquitex basic acrylics that you can find in any art store or Michael's. And it's a combination of both of those that I use religiously, really. That's all I use. I like the Liquitex basics because they add lots of texture. Like when this painting is done, it's going to be bumpy, which I think is super interesting. I have no interest in painting flat. I have tremendous respect for those that do, because I don't know how they do it. But I do love texture. And so I'm just going in and adding a few things of interest, kind of randomly. Sort of this technique that I use of, I don't know, it's almost like a pixelation, a look. It actually came to me in a dream a number of years ago. I was working on a portrait of Louis Armstrong, and I really wasn't happy with it. And so I went to sleep with the intention of figuring it out. How do I fix this? And in my sleep, I came up with that technique. I woke up and went out to the studio, and I got it on the canvas right away. And I have used it many, many times over the years. Many times. So there's a mix of that. Keep in mind. I'm on the fence about what to do on my shadow side. Sometimes I like to put an outline that is not white and not dark, but somewhere in the middle. And I haven't decided whether I want to do that yet. Yeah. Now, these are the decisions I got to make late in the process. Oh, yeah, for time. So about 5 after 11. I hope you're thinking about the potential of using this simple workshop for yourself in whatever setting might be of interest, whether it's a birthday party or a team building session. It really is not hard. But again, if you have the opportunity to add the component of going out and building the rocks together, that would certainly be a recommendation of mine if you could, if the opportunity was there. You just add a whole new additional dimension to the experience. So I'm just going to do a couple more things, and I think I've made the decision that I'm going to add some water splashes as if this is in water where the water is splashing up against it, I think. Whew, I think that'll be a bit of a risk, but I'm going to do it anyway, just because. I mentioned that you got to go with the flow. You have to allow the inspiration to strike you, and sometimes you got to take a leap off the bridge to try something perhaps a little bit risky. So I'm going to do that. Yeah. So in order to do that, yeah, I'll make sure all my colors right. Might even need a new palette. Yeah. Sorry for the odd noises. Sometimes when the paint comes out, it sounds a little bit weird. So. Right. This is where I get a little bit messy. Trying to get some splatters to create the water effect. That's what I want. You kind of give over control when you start doing splatters. That's all right. And with the splatters, I typically use go white first, and then I add just some blue and green tones. The only advice I have when you're doing splatters is make sure there's no other paintings around. Because even though I'm looking around, I'm going, okay, where are the rest of these splatters going? Ah! And I have done that to both my work and to Heather's work. And I always feel bad about it. Again, I normally do this flat, but just for the purposes of you being able to see, I'm gonna have it up a little bit higher too, because okay. So I'm at the point now where I'm just going to clean up a few things, and mine will be mostly done, I think. Mostly. Some water. last thing I'm thinking about is, okay, where am I going to sign my name? And where will it be seen? I mean, that's a small little thing, but I'm actually going to just fudge the corner here a little bit so that I have a bit more white. And I guess it's totally random with the little splashes. So that is, I'm just going to let that dry and then maybe have one final look at it and finish it off. But that really is all there is for the workshop. So I'd encourage you, as you continue to work on your piece, that you think about the people that you thought of at the beginning, and remember the words from "A river runs through it." Maybe I'll say that again for you. It's one of my favorite passages. Eventually, all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. The river was cut by the world's great flood that runs over rocks from the basement of time. And some of those rocks are timeless raindrops. And under the rocks are the words, and some of the words are theirs. So hopefully you have a piece that celebrates and honors the words of the people that have helped shape who you are, and that you've enjoyed this experience and learned a little bit about playing with color and having some fun and figuring out where your light's coming from. And I look forward to seeing what you did. So if you feel comfortable doing so, you can either send me a private note. I think everybody that's watching is connected to me. You can do that, or you can tag the Okotoks Culture and Heritage Department page when you're finished. But that's it. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you to JB for her support and being here as well. JB is with the town of Okotoks. And that's it. Thanks, everybody. Take care.